All right. Well, welcome to my studio. This is Beth, and I'm going to be your instructor for today. This is the painting that we're going to do. It's a small painting, and I am using acrylic paper pad. It comes in larger sheets. Uh, the original sheet on this was a 9 by 12, but I cut it down, and it's about a 9 by 6. This is really convenient for framing, but it's also convenient for storing. Okay, again, this is acrylic canvas paper. I'm going to be working with acrylic paint, and when you're painting, you really don't need anything fancy. You just need something that will hold your paint. And here I have a paper plate. Sometimes I use my fancy little easel stand with all the goodies on it, but any kind of really non-porous surface will work. The colors I'm going to be working with is ultramarine blue, cad yellow. I also have some golden yellow, which is a little more fluid. This is heavy body, using titanium white, Mars black, crimson red, and burnt umber. The brushes that I'll be using are two different sizes. One is a round brush and one is a flat brush. I might even use my fan brush. I'm having a lot of good results using the fan brush. It gives me more shapes than I could normally get with these two. Now, depending on the manufacturer, the size is usually written. I get mine in bulk off of Amazon. So this would probably be like number one or number two. Okay. This is also a number one or number two. It's a small surface, so I'm not using really large brushes like this one. But unfortunately, there's no universal size for brushes. It just depends on the manufacturer. Okay. This one is a flat brush, just like this one. This is a number four, but you would think a number two or number one would be larger. Again, it depends on the manufacturer. So I'm going to start out by using a wet paper towel. Now, the paper towels that I use are made by Visa, and I don't get any money from Visa. Okay. But I like theirs because it's cloth-like. You can use any kind of soft cloth to work on the method that I'm going to show you. You can also use some hand wipes. That's really good. Or if you just have a paper towel, you're going to wet it. But you want to just have it moist. You don't want it dripping down your hand because you're going to be putting wet paint on top of it, and it's just going to, you're just making soup, and you're not trying to make soup. You want to be moist enough so it will move around, but at the same time, you don't want it where it's going to be streaking way too much. The other thing that I'm going to be using is a pencil, okay? Or you can use a piece of chalk. I will often have these nearby with a piece of scrap paper because I have random thoughts. Like I need to go pick up laundry, or I need to go to the grocery store, or I need to test a color before I actually put it on my surface. So I always have the pencil handy. Um, you can also sketch on your surface. You just have to be really careful, especially if you're using any kind of leaded paint, or even drawing pencils can be kind of dicey because you cannot get rid of the line once you get it on there. And if you do try to take it up, you want to make sure that you use a clean eraser. As you can see, this one has been used quite a bit in regular drawing. So I would clean this little edge here before I try to lift it. This does not erase paint. It only erases pencil. If I have a dark surface and I'm trying to decide, I've gotten something started and I want to add something, but I don't want to paint it on and then have to paint it out because I didn't like it. Chalk is a good way to do some preliminary sketches on top of whatever you're doing, but you have to make sure the surface is dry. So if I want to add a big tree here, I'll just draw it in first, and then if I don't like it, I'll just wipe it off. Again, your surface does have to be dry. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, put this aside. I wanted you to kind of see where we're going. It's always good to have an idea of what you're going to paint before you paint it. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, again, I'm going to use a wet cloth. And I have a little container of water over here on the edge. I'm squeezing it out. It's moist, but it's not dripping. I'm going to dip into, fold this over, have my finger right here, and I'm going to fold it over. I'm going to dip into my white first. White, and just on the edge, you never dip in the middle, whether you're using this method or using a brush. Always pull from the edge. And I have a little bit of blue. And I'm going to come across here diagonally. Okay, so I'm going to draw this in first so you can kind of see. This is going to be my sky. I'm not going all the way across because I know I'm going to put a mountain here. And I'm making some long sweeping motions. And a little more white. And I'm going to leave some streaks here in the sky. If you want to make yours a solid sky and maybe paint some clouds in later, you can do that. But this is a quick way to get your shapes and your colors in. Move my paper over here. Now right here, I'm going to make a triangular shape. This is stylized one, I know for you mathematicians, but it's going to come down here to a point and then come back this way. This time I'm going to add a little more blue and less white. And you can see I'm stirring it a little bit so I can get on that flat surface, and just a little bit of white. And then I'm going to come across here, because this is the shape that I'm making, here and here. It's going to be a little bit darker and a little more streaky, because I don't want it to be the same shade as my sky. So I'm going to add just a hint, because I want to gray it just a little bit, just a hint. Black is the color that I'm using here. As you can see, black can really cover up everything. So I'm using just a little bit. I'm going to pull a little more blue. So I want kind of a blue-gray. Oh yeah, that's good right there. And I'm making a sweeping motion back and forth. Coming down toward the bottom of my picture a little bit more. It's not as sweeping as this, but this is going to be part of a mountain. So I want to do some directional, what we call directional painting. Now, while this is still moist, I'm just going to add a little bit of white. And very lightly. I'm going to pull these streaks down where the snow has been falling. Some areas are going to be a little brighter white than others. And I'm starting on the edge and I'm pulling down. Just want to make sure I'm not starting in the middle and then trying to fill it in. I'm making sweeps so it's like light pressure, heavier pressure. Light pressure, heavier pressure. Then I'm going off the edge. I want a little more snow right along this edge. So I'm just kind of folding this over and tapping that first, and very lightly. I'm going to change just the edge of that. And then I'm going to kind of tap down here. I'm just tapping very lightly, kind of fuzzing this up just a little bit. Get some different shapes down here. Okay. Making a little bit of mist down here at the bottom of the mountain. And you're not going to focus on trying to get this perfect because we'll be painting over this part and it really won't make any difference. Okay. All right, now I'm going to come across this way. So I have my triangle here. I'm going to do another triangle going in this direction. So we're going to paint right across there. So I'm going to make it a little bit darker. I'm going to add a little bit of that burnt sienna in here. My burnt sienna is really, really thick. But I'm going to add burnt sienna. A little of that ultramarine blue. Tiny bit of white. And I'm doing all this in that same spot. All these colors will blend together. Then I'll test it to see if it's a little bit darker. A little more blue and white. It's a little bit too dark. There we go, right along here. Test that out. And I can make my triangle shape. And around here. And then come up. And then I'm going to just kind of lift, just so I get some irregular shapes here. And again, this is all a part of your background. It's not critical that you get a lot of detailing. You're just trying to get that base color down. Now, as we get closer and closer to the bottom, because that is going to be in our foreground, all this is background. Now we're kind of in the middle, getting closer here. So I'm going to open up my cloth here and flip it over. I'm going to put some water down here. Okay. Find a clean spot. I'm going to get some blue and white together right here. I don't want to mix it too much because I want most of my mixing to be done here. And then I'm going to do some diagonal brushes back and forth all the way down. Beautiful. And along this shoreline here. And I like to use the same cloth because some of this blue, if I add pressure, it's going to come out and blend in what I already have here. Then I don't have to add so much blue later on. Again, back and forth. Remember, this is going to be ice down here. And ice is actually clear. But humans see blue shadows. Add a little more white, put a little more icing right in here. The further back it gets, it's going to be even lighter. Goes up around this little peninsula here. And I'm just adding a little bit at a time. So you load your brush or you load your cloth or whatever it is. You load it first and then you wipe it off. Because no matter how much you think you don't have, you're going to have twice as much. So I always tap off my brush and I also tap off my cloth. And again, I'm going right off the edge and I'm lifting toward the center. Instead of starting here and then scrubbing, I'm lifting. And the same thing on this side. Turn this around, maybe there's some blue there. I can softly blend that out. That helps to set up my water. All right, so I'm going to put this aside. I'm not going to get rid of it, but it's still moist, and I can use this to actually wipe off my brush rather than dipping my brush in water. What happens is when you put too much water in your brush, it starts to swell, and so when you paint, your paint's going to get watery. So to alleviate that problem, we just have a wet, moist cloth. I usually have a couple of these going at one time. But this will do just well, and I just wipe it off. It keeps it nice and moist, and it doesn't water down the color that I'm going to be putting on here. So now my next level here, I'm going to come back up here. It actually almost forms its own little island. We're going to have the mountains coming down. There's going to be a little island here. I'm going to bring another maybe triangle shape here. Bring this down to the shoreline. And I'm going to bring another little partial land mass right about here. So I'm going to be mixing my own green. And you can always just get the green right out the container. You do not have to mix your own. I just happen to like doing that. So I'm using a little bit of the ultramarine blue and I'm using some of that golden yellow with a little bit of cat yellow. It's going to get me a really nice looking green. It's still a little bit too bright, too much of a contrast, but I do want to make sure I have plenty of it. I'm going to take a little bit of black right here. And I'm not concerned about any colors that are in here because I'm using a little bit of blue anyway. If I add a little bit of black and yellow, I'm going to get a deeper green. Now you can use your brush to mix this. As you can see, I'm pushing to make sure I get all of that paint out of my brush. You can also use an offset spatula like this one, or if you have a craft stick, you can use that. But what happens too when you're using your brush, you'll notice I have paint all up here on my metal piece. So I'm going to take that moist paper towel and just squeeze it. I'm squeezing the belly. I'm starting at the heel, squeeze the belly right on out the edges. And then I'm going to reload my brush. I'm going to tap some of it off. And right along here, I'm just going to kind of sketch out. Okay, I want the line to come down this way. Again, kind of off the side. Maybe have some snow coming down this way. Okay, and I'm going to have some reflections coming down there. And then just kind of sketch this. Okay. And what this does, it gives a place for your eye to go constantly. If I left this open, I'd have a big spot right here. And composition wise, it's not a good idea to have a great big empty space. So that's why I'm making these little triangular shapes. Okay. I'm going to add a little bit of white because again, it's further away. When I mix, I don't mix my whole batch. I'm just, again, working off the edge just so that I know if I need to go back to this color, I'll have the color right there waiting for me. So I'm just doing some pouncing. I'm using both sides of my brush. Coming down here. All this is going to be underpainting, just like this. This is just underpainting. And you can do that with a wet cloth too. I want a little more control. So now I'm going to come in with my darker greens. And all I did was add again yellow and black, but this time with less white. And I'm just using the side of my flat brush. I'm not filling in every space. I am leaving some textural quality to this. This I use the side of my flat brush. And now I'm just going to, it's called scumbling, where you just kind of scribble a little bit, make this a little bit uneven back and forth right off the edge. Because we want to make sure it looks like it's planted rather than just floating in water. So we're going to make our shoreline a little uneven. Since we're down here on the ground, I'm going to mix that up with a little bit of that green and burnt umber. And just a little bit of white. And then just soften that. We're going to let that dry out. Okay, so while this is drying, because we're going to put snow over here and do some more shaping of the mounds. Okay, so over here, it's further back. It's going to be a little bit lighter. You're going to get back into that gray tone. And you'll notice that I am not cleaning my brush. I'm going to add a little bit of white to that. And that's with my dirty brush, a little bit of white. And again, I need to gray it just a little bit. So I'm going to add a little black, a little bit of burnt umber. And I have to make some decisions here about my shoreline. It's showing a little bit of green, but I'm not trying to make it solid. And again, I'm doing scumbling right along the edge of my brush. I'm doing some upward strokes. Just giving a hint of, oh, there's some trees back here. I already have a tree line here, so I'm making a secondary tree line using that mixture from down here, which is like a graying of the green. And if your paint gets a little bit too dark, you can just come back and paint right over that. A little more green on there. And this is going to help us with our dry brushing. I'm pressing my brush. And again, directional painting. I'm going to come straight down. It's going to reflect just the very top. So I don't want my reflection to come way down here. I'm just going to go inland a little bit there. And I am just dry brushing. If I need a little more paint to come out, I can either add pressure or I can reload. I can use the side of my brush to give it a little more definition so it's not too blurred. And we'll come in and cut in the shoreline in just a moment. We're going to let that dry. So any jagged edge I have up here is going to be reflected in the water. Because this is taller, it's going to show more of this shape. So I need one high one right here. And again, without reloading my brush, because that's going to make it too, I'm just going to add a little more pressure on my brush and use the paint that's there. Now I'm going to paint this. This is closer to us. So now we're going to, again, use some of that yellow and black. And again, you have to kind of control that black because it will take over completely. So now I have this really dark green. It's closer to us. So this, look how dark that is now. It's the closest to us. And I'm not doing any kind of directional painting here. I want to be kind of a rough surface. It's a dark green. Add a little more of the burnt sienna here and there. Get some of those earth tones in there. Because we have to create the land before we put snow on it. So you're creating your basic shapes. And as you can see, I have a piece of paper under here. Helps to keep my other surfaces clean. And then I'm going to just lift. And because I'm working with paper, and I did not tape it down, but I do that on purpose because I like to move my artwork. I'm always marveling at artists that do not have to move anything, but I don't want to twist my arm or my wrist. I'd rather move the artwork instead of getting carpal tunnel trying to paint straight up and down all the time. Now these wisps are going to be irregular. I'm going to put some frost on them later on. And they should not all be the same size because we are out in the wilderness. So the closer we come to the viewer, and that's us, down in this area, you have more detailing, more texture. Here it's kind of vague. So we're going to let that dry. Now I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to squeeze. No pulling, just gently. You work it down from the toe to the belly. I mean the heel. This is the heel, belly, that's the toe. You can also wipe off my hands. Get another wet cloth and just continue to squeeze and work that color out. I want to try to get this as clean as I can without getting another brush and starting over with that one, because I do want a hint of the color still in here when we start putting our snow on. We're going to be using we'll try with the flat brush, and we'll move over to using the maybe the fan brush too, but we'll see. All right, I'm going to take just plain white and put it on the toe, not the heel, but the toe. And I'm going to, this is still a little bit wet in here, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to add some snow on these trees. I'm starting with the ones that are in the back. Very nondescript. But when I fill them in, I am trying to make the shape of a tree. I'm not just making polka dots. Put some snow on this one. They're more like a triangle. And I'm using the edge of my flat brush. If you feel more comfortable using a round brush, then use a round brush. And if you look for the shape of the tree, it will make it easier. If you don't see the shape of a tree, then think like a tree. It's small at the top and large at the bottom. And again, we're not going to just make a solid triangle. You are very lightly tapping. And I'm using both sides of my brush. Thinking triangle. Make sure that all of your trees are pointing toward the sky and not laying down. That would be a different picture where we show fallen trees, but this is not the one. Go back up here. And you'll notice that I'm not filling in every little spot. I do want some of that green and some of that burnt umber showing through. So I'm going to start here. Again, I'm loading my brush and you tap it off. I'm still working with the toe. And I'm just going to dry brush some edges. I'm going to leave some of that brown showing, but some of this is going to come right into the water. Again, doing some directional painting. Using that chiseled edge. I got the one layer. So now I'm going to come back and just add some white in certain areas. What this does, it creates a little highlight. And right now it looks kind of bright, but that happens when you're using white paint. It will appear to be very, very light at first. And then as it dries, because it's acrylic, it will actually become darker. See some of these spots where I painted before, they've almost disappeared. So we'll let that dry for a moment. Now we're going to come back here. I'm going to reload my brush. And what I'm doing is I'm wiping it off. Bring it to a chiseled edge like that. With these along the top, I'm not going to try and cover up everything. But what I want to do is just Very lightly dry brush. Again, this is far, far away. And I'm just dusting these little top ones with just a little bit of snow. Very, very light. That first little row that we did before. I'm going to do one row of trees at a time. These are far away. I hardly have any paint at all on my brush. Just little hints of snow. Now I'm going to load my brush again. If your paint begins to get a little bit too dry, I'm working in a studio now where the fan is going and the paint will dry up sometimes and I'll need to start over, wipe off my brush. Okay, so now this next little row, I'm still using that upward brushing. Some are more solid than others because I'm going to come back in and make some tree shapes. But I want to get that dry brush in first. Alright, so now I'm going to come back here. This is almost dry. And again, I'm going to start thinking like a tree. Because I've got some little tree shapes here. And I'll put another one here. And if you use the flat side of your brush, start here on the edge and then come back and forth. You can widen out those trees. These little small ones, I would not worry about those. I would just do these. Okay. Don't forget to wipe it off because my brush is getting a little thick. So I'm going to wipe it on this wet cloth up here to thin that paint out just a little bit. There's another one. Need some in the front, some in the back. And even if it don't look like trees right now, we're going to come back and put more detailing in. So we're going to be back here. And here I'm just putting just the top of the trees because these are behind the other ones. And again, as I get further back, it gets smaller. You don't have to paint every little tree branch. You're just giving a hint of what's back there. Just a hint. And now I'm just going back and just touching. Where would the tall one be and where would the short one be? How far down would it come? Let's put a little snow. I'll dry brush this, so I'm wiping off my brush just a little bit. Very good. Maybe up on that side. And again, don't make it even. And this is where we can decide where the land, and remember we put those vertical lines there. That's going to determine where the shadow in the water is going to fall. Any reflection is going to be down there. Maybe it comes down in here a little bit, goes back. Because when snow falls, it does not fall evenly. And again, we're not worried about a lot of detailing right now. I'm wiping my brush off, getting a drop of water, and wiping my brush. And wipe that off just a little bit. Now I'm going to dry brush, pulling some of that reflection down too. Very light. Pulling straight down, straight down. And back here in the back, while I just have a little bit of paint, this is also going to be a little scumbling here, a little snow going up the mountain. Not a lot of detail back here. Anytime I need to soften anything, I'll just use my finger. And these are far away. There's something going up the side of the mountain. But these are mainly down here at the bottom. Darken that up just a little bit. So I do have a little bit of that green on my brush. So the smell is going to change just a little bit down here. Okay. I'm going to add a little more but just to a few of the trees, the ones that are really getting highlighted. A little more definition to my trees. And a little more snow. And add some more trees going up this way. Right down here at the bottom. And they're overlapping. But again, they're far, far away. You can see something that's back here, but we can't see every little tree. It's more like a cluster of trees. I'll put a line right across here and bring it to a point right across my reflections. And what that does, it pushes that down underneath the water. I might even put a couple of rocks over here, I'm not sure yet. Let's see. Put one here. And a little white to that. Gray that up just a little bit. I'm just putting down a few rocks here and there just to add a little interest. I'm going to put some snow on those rocks. We need to let that dry just a little bit, otherwise we'll just have some gray mounds. I'm going to lift some of that paint off. Bring it over here to this big rock. Maybe one right here. What that will do is bring the eye closer to the center. I want to keep this nice and moist, so put just a drop of water and reshape it. And let's see, I think it's time to add some snow here. Some snow on our rocks here. Maybe somebody's been walking over here. I'm going to bring out some of the shape of the snow. It's maybe piling up on some of this rough texture here. And of course, we want to think like a rock. How would snow land over here? And then we're just going to put a little frost on our shapes here. Snow faucet. Wipe some of that off. It's tempting to just put a great big blob of paint, but take your time and think about it. How would snow fall in this little blade of grass or this little weed that's there? Or if it's a flower, maybe it's frozen in the snow. No, I think I'm going to change it. I'm really not liking those little trees. I think I'm just going to have some snow there. The floor, I want to make sure that that's completely dry. Little snow caps on these rocks here. I'm going to let that dry. And I'm going to add a little blue. Go back to my original blue and white. I might just paint that out. And then some of that blue down on there. I'm going to shadow it first. See how that looks. Kind of, yeah, I like it better. And a little more white here. Some of that fluid ultimately blue. Try not to make them too much the same. Straighten it up just a little bit. Put that better. Add a little more shadow down in here. See if I like that. I'm just going to tap some blue right in here. And then I'm going to softly blend that out. I like that better. Because I can always lighten it once I get that blue down. And just use my wet paper towel because I can smooth that out and soften it. Use some of the dark showing, but then feather the rest of that out. Maybe give it a mystical quality by adding just a little bit of white. So first I'm going to put the paint down, make sure it's wet. And then very softly I'm going to make some circular motions here and lighten that up just a little bit. A little more mist at the bottom. And add a few more water lines. And add a little, just a hint of a shoreline right in here, but not too dark. I'm using a teeny tiny, just a tiny brush. I'm using a little bit of green, that green and black. See how that works in there. Have to be careful not to smudge that down here. Add a little more distinction here because we're getting closer to the shoreline here. And we're going to add a little more black to that to darken it, and even maybe use a little bit of that burnt sienna to show some of that land that's underneath here. There we go, that's better. And then just very lightly bring out a little more detailing. So our land goes in a little bit there. A little bit up in this way. Underneath there. And sometimes that one or two little details like that really pulls it all together. You put a little bit of shadow in these rocks here. On that underside where it's in the water. And again, I'm just dry brushing. These are not hard lines. Okay, so the light will be coming from that direction. So a little bit of light and a little bit of shadow. And bring some of that burnt umber and that green here too. Get a little more definition. And what this does, it ties in the rest of your painting. If you have a little bit of each one of those colors in every part of your painting. And put a little diluted burnt umber here. Maybe even shading some of those rocks. Pulling that up just a little bit. Put some branches and some tree trunks. Again, this is very watery, so it's not a really heavy-handed burnt umber. Bring some of that brown up in here, down here in the back. Bring a little more highlight. Again, that white that we had before, it's not there anymore. It's not as bright. And even after this dries, you can always come back and add yet another layer of white. Because even if you're working with titanium white, which tends to be a little bit opaque, because you're painting on dark colors, it will dry just a little bit darker than that. All right. I think I'm ready to sign this one, which just means that I've taken it as far as I think I can go, but there's always one more thing to paint on here, but I am going to stop here, and I'm going to go ahead and sign it. And you can sign yours in any color that you like. Remember, your signature is for identification purposes. It is not always a part of the painting and taking over the painting. Fortunately, I have a short name, so that makes it nice and easy. Again, thank you for joining me. I hope you learned a few things, and I hope to be able to teach you some more tricks of the trade at our next session. So until then, I will talk to you later. Bye.